Good evening everyone. Welcome to this video. In this video we will be talking about procedural sequence models. So we will be discussing about sequence diagrams with passive objects, okay, and also like sequence diagrams with transient objects. Okay. So in the last video we have seen about sequence diagrams, okay, but we have seen sequence diagrams that actually containing independent objects, okay, all of which are active concurrently. So, for example, like the example which we have seen earlier, okay, so this sequence diagram for stock purchase, we had this sort of customer object, stock broker object, and securities exchange. The customer object is entering the purchase data, so the funds are verified at the stock broker system, okay, and basically it asks like a request for confirmation. Once it basically verifies like everything is okay, okay. So then we basically send the confirm the purchase, okay. So the customer object will send the confirm purchase. Based on that one, like it will place an order to the securities exchange, the stock broker system will place the order, and it will also display the order number. So the concurrent objects like we have seen in this example as well. So that will basically execute the order and then like report results of the trade. The interesting thing here is like all the three objects are active all the time. So that's why like the activation is actually showing from the beginning till the end of the time in the sequence diagram. Okay. An object remains active after sending a message and can respond to other messages without waiting for the response. Okay. So all these messages are actually asynchronous messages. So you are not waiting for the response to come back. Okay. So that is like the activation is actually shown across the full timeline, okay, and the object remains active all the time. But the big problem with this one is most implementations are procedural, okay, and limit the number of objects that can actually execute at a particular time. If that is the case, then you cannot have the objects to be active all the time, okay. So a passive object actually, okay, so it is not active always, okay, so that's the first thing. Okay, objects are not constantly active. Okay. A passive object is not activated until it has been called for. Okay, I will show you the example, then it will actually make the things clear for you. Once the execution of the operation completes and the control actually returns to the caller, the passive object becomes inactive. See, earlier all the objects were actually active. So that means like they are in active state full time. Okay. Because this procedural code will not allow all the objects to be running all the time, executing it all the time. So there are certain passive objects. The passive objects becomes activated state when it is actually called for. Once the execution of the operation completes and then like the control returns to the caller, the passive object again becomes inactive. Okay, let me show you the example, then it basically clears the things for you. So here is a sequence diagram that actually computes the commission for stock brokerage transaction. What it does is, okay, so it will have this sort of initial message coming in. So here is a transaction object. We have to basically compute the commission for a particular transaction. The transaction object, it has to basically compute the commission. So this is the found message, okay, which actually starts the sequence diagram. In the last video, like as the advanced concepts, I have discussed this one. Okay, but with the found message, like basically a sequence diagram starts. So in this case, it is compute commission. So the transaction object, so this is an active object, so which is like active throughout the time. Okay. But then like it will actually, so there is this customer table object, okay, and then like there is this read table object. First let me explain the procedure. So once this sort of compute commission message has actually come in, okay, so basically like the input is basically the caller is like this one, this time like you see the solid arrow, okay, and then like the response is basically this dashed line. So once you receive the compute commission, it basically asks for the service level, okay, of the customer to this sort of customer table. then basically like the customer table will return the level. So here is the activation, you can see. So once the message basically goes, that is a passive object, it becomes an active state. Okay, it comes to the active state, and then like it basically performs that operation and sends the level back, and again like it becomes inactive state. So that's why like this activation rectangle, it actually starts here with the arrow and it basically ends with this sort of response going back. Okay, once you have the level, then it basically like the transaction object will basically call this rate table, and it will basically invoke the message for calculate commission. Okay, so that is the method called in this case. So it basically sends the level of the customer and also the transaction as the input parameters. Again, like this will basically, again this is a passive object, so which gets activated after receiving the message, and then like once this response, the commission is calculated, the commission is actually sent back. Okay, so again its activation is actually from here till here, so beginning of this sort of rectangle till the end of the rectangle. Interestingly, the lifeline actually shows the object lying throughout the lines. I mean, like throughout its existence. So the lifeline is this complete thing, whereas the activation is only this much. Okay. For an active object, you can actually see like, so for example, this rectangle, the activation is is throughout the life cycle. Okay, throughout the sequence diagram. Okay. But for passive objects, like they will become active and then like they become inactive. Okay, that's about this example. Hope it is now clear. Okay, once you receive the commission is actually sent back. Okay, so that's about this sequence diagram. So I have discussed this in the earlier example in the last video. Okay, so for example, like some of the sequence diagrams will have this sort of transient objects. The objects can be created and destroyed as part of the sequence diagram. So now let us try to discuss this a little bit in deep so that like you will understand the concept better, and then like I will explain the same example again. See this one. In this case, object A, which is an active object, that's why like you are seeing like again going back to the same concept. You see like the activation is during the full time of the sequence, whereas object B is passive object. Object B is passive object. So it becomes activated once there is a message coming in. So there is a call for that object. Okay, and then like once the response goes back. Okay, so it is basically becomes like inactive state, object A. So see this one here. Object A is actually calling this operation E. Okay, with this input parameter C and D on object B. So that's when like it came to the active state, and then like it is activated. That's how like the rectangle is actually showing. So within that particular method time, so basically like from the beginning till the end of that method, okay, so until you basically send back the response, it may call other objects. So that means like it is in the active state, and it then like say for example in this case it is actually create C argument. It is sent. So that will actually create this sort of object C here. So that means like object C is actually being created when this message basically comes here. So when the operation is called create C with this particular argument. So the object C is created. See this one, object C is an active object actually. So that means like its activation actually started from beginning until it is actually destroyed. So immediately it is in the control state. And in fact, actually what it is doing is this object C is actually calling operation E method on object E. And this is a recursive operation. In fact, actually like when you call another method on during its activation, you will have another activation rectangle. Okay, superimposed on this one. And then like your response is result T. Okay, so which will basically execute the order, okay, whatever it is, something it will do. And then like the object, once it basically returns the control here, so it basically gets killed. Okay, so the object is destroyed, and then like you don't see its lifeline anymore. See this one, there is no lifeline for this particular object anymore after the object is destroyed. So from creation till the end, it is in the activation state. Okay, so that means like it is an active object. So once this response has come back, and then like you can actually send the result back, okay, because you have received a call with operation E, you are sending the result back, result A, result value, and then like that's it. So basically like the activation finishes, and then like this object B becomes like inactive, okay. So in this way, like we have seen like both these sort of passive objects, okay, along with becoming active and inactive, and also like we have seen these transient objects which actually gets created and then like destroyed in memory. So to put all the things together, object C is actually created and destroyed during the time shown on the diagram. Okay, that's what we have seen here. Object is created here, okay, because this is the timeline. Okay, so object is created here and object is actually destroyed here. We see the times. So its lifeline does not span the whole diagram. Okay, so I already have discussed this. The new object may or may not retain control after it is created. In the example which we have seen here, so the object C is actually retaining the control. So that is why like it is becoming an active object. So it is retaining the control till it is actually destroyed again. So from the moment like it is actually created. It don't have to be like this. So again object C can be passive. So then you will have this lifeline here, and then like say for example when it calls for a method, like it can basically start here. It is pretty much possible. Not all return arrows have result values, okay, and we have seen this example, the return from object C to object B. Object C is actually created, so when it is getting destroyed, okay, so it has nothing, okay, no result is actually sent. It's only a result which actually says like you have created object and then like it called this recursive operation, okay. It can be any other operation, but then like here in this case like it is a recursive operation because operation E, within that one it is calling operation E again, okay. So here the control is basically going back without any result. That's the basic idea. Call to a second method on the same object is shown as an additional rectangle superimposed. I have already talked about. In the example we have seen, that's in recursive method. It don't have to be recursive method. It can be any method. Okay. Now this is about this sort of advanced concepts of sequence diagram. And now you will understand the advanced example which I have given in the previous video much better. Okay. So we have seen like so we wanted to execute a query. Okay, so this example I have discussed in detail in the previous video, but let me talk about it again. Okay, so you want to basically execute a query. So you want to query the database. There is a handler. Okay, so in this case like it is shown like it is a passive object. Okay, so you receive a query database. Okay, message. With that one like this A handler, its lifeline is full time, okay, but then like it is in activation state only during this time. After that it becomes inactive. In the beginning also like it was in the inactive state. When it has received this query database message, it becomes like active state. Then it actually creates this query command object with this new method, okay. So that will create this particular object. This object again, so the query command is also a passive object. So it is not active always, but then like when it basically wants to create a new database statement, okay, so it will basically create this new message, and then like that's when like it is becoming activated. Once it is activated, a database statement is there, then it will basically execute the query, okay. So the message basically comes here, and then like you created the results and the results are sent back, and then like this the database statement object will become inactive, okay. So then like there is a self message, okay, extracting the results. You see like this superimposed rectangle of activation you will be seeing. So here in this case like a message is actually called, okay, a method is called, okay. So that means like it will actually start here. So you extracted the results and the results are basically ready here. Then you send another message to close, basically close it. The object basically destroys itself. Okay, so after that particular thing. So since it is actually destroyed, like you don't even have to send the response back. Okay, in the earlier example, like we have shown it like in a line, which actually shows like just that it is actually destroyed. That's all. There is no response back. Of course, once that is done, then you basically send the results back to this a handler, okay, and that actually makes it into inactive state, okay. So the handler basically gets those results and then like, okay, so it has those results. So the return message is there. So then like basically like this query command can be basically destroyed, okay, it is stopped. So the object is actually destroyed here. It is deleted. I mean, it is ready for the garbage collection in that case. And then like this a handler has become like into an inactive state, which we have actually discussed earlier. That say for example, like the next query request can basically come here. Okay. So this object is like error. Okay, so it is not, it is in passive state, but then like it is like error. So that's about these sort of sequence diagrams with this sort of passive objects and also like um, transient objects, which are actually created and destroyed. So regarding the reference are concerned, again we are in chapter 8. Okay, so of this object-oriented modeling and design with UML book. Thank you very much for your attention.